Hey there, this is Dan and you're watching The Salty Sea. Today I'm going to be starting the first of a four-part series on just getting down some starter lists for every warband. This time it's going to be for destruction. So just want to talk about the premise here. I hear a lot of people asking for like, hey, is there just a set of lists for such and such warband? And then a lot of the time people, send them to a guide, and I think guides for warbands are really important. But I do want to just make this just a resource for anyone to be able to just look, go straight to where their faction is, and then see three lists for it. So there's not going to be any guides here. I do plan on resuming my faction rundown series after I come out with a new Math Hammer guide. I want to rework how I've been doing some of the numbers. In the meantime, I would check out Rito's faction guides. He's done one for every faction after the Grand Alliance books came out. A ton of work he's put into the game. Really love it. Definitely check out his channel if you haven't already. I'm sure most of you who've stumbled into this video have. So for each faction, I'm going to be doing three types of lists. The first is going to be a budget list, so building with as few boxes as possible. Won't always be the absolute cheapest if a solid one box alternative exists. Though I did find a very cheap thing for Ironjawz I do like, so that's going to be cool. And then I'll have a competitive list, just purely built to win in as many mission types as possible. Um, about half the time, actually, this will end up being the same as what you find in Rito's faction guide. Um, People start to think alike in this game. There's only so many ways to min-max, but about half the time it won't be, too. Sometimes it'll be because I rate something a little higher than he does, or sometimes it'll be because, you stand on the shoulders of giants, and I sort of took a look and I thought a little about how I'd improve that one. Then I'm always going to add just a sweet list. Something kind of off meta but awesome. A lot of the times these can still win. And these are going to be perfect for starting a campaign or just having a beer and pretzels game with friends. Um, Honestly, the sweet lists I think are the best ways to enjoy yourself in this game, but people tend to want to know the cheapest and the most powerful lists anyway. So even though that's not where my heart lies and where I'd argue you should be playing this game, I'm going to put those two first. So let's get straight into it with Gloomspite Gitz. One of the best budget ways to build them is just buying the Zarbag's Gitz and the Sneaky Snuffler kit. This is going to be a little bit more functional than some of the other sort of super cheap ways to do it for about the same price. So you can run Zarbag as a Fungoid Cave Shaman. He's on the wrong size base, but I can't imagine anyone is going to be upset with you in Warcry for doing that because the base advantage or disadvantage is so tiny. And then you can run 5 Sneaky Snufflers, a Squig, 3 Shooters, a Netter, and a Squig Herder. So this is a lot of numbers for a budget list, and a lot of different options too. The Sneaky Snufflers are a really good fighty unit for Gloomspite, so that's why I'd suggest starting off with a lot of those if you're just getting into them or just want to dip your toe in for Warcry. As far as competitive goes, the way I would attack this faction competitively is building around a Squig Hopper boss, so 250 points for a real monster, and then doing 3 Shooters, 3 Sneaky Snufflers, and 7 Netters. I think you want to really flood the board with Netters if you're going for Gloomspite Gitz. And the Shooters are just nice to just have a few of them sprinkled in, just because a lot of the time you'll start with a deployment pretty far away, and a shooter can still project power where you need it to without needing to move. Then as far as a sweet list, I think the Orc Megaboss is one of the coolest sculpts in the game, and it combos in a really fun way with the Brugit, where Brugits give multiple extra attacks, and the Orc Megaboss does a ton of damage per attack. So you're bringing in one of the coolest sculpts in the game. You're using the 2 members of the Gobapalooza in this list, in the Brugit and the Shrewmancer. If the Orc Megaboss is one of the coolest sculpts in Destruction, the Gobapalooza is certainly up there with him as far as the Grand Alliance goes. Then this list has a ton of game too, because you're still bringing 5 Nettas, and you're still bringing the Squig Hopper boss, which is just one of the absolute assassins of the game. So those are 3 lists for Gloomspite Gitz. I can't suggest the sweet one anymore. It's really cool, but the others are going to be either the cheapest or most competitive way to play it. Then let's get into Bonesplitterz. Bonesplitterz are a little more complicated. They are one of the lower tier factions, it's true, but the most competitive way to play them, there are kind of 2 different ones. So I'm gonna forego sweet lists because everything with Bonesplitterz is pretty sweet, and just go with 2 competitive ones. So let's start with the budget though. So 1 box of Savage Orcs can get you a ton of different options. So you can do a Savage Morboy boss, a Savage Arrow boss, and then just a group of Savage Orcs. So 2 of the big Stabbas, those do great damage per point. Um, the box comes with 2 Bone Totems, so you can put them both on Morboys. And then you can also round things out with a Savage Orc with the Champa and the Bone Shield. And that's a really nice way to start the faction, 7 model warband. You can also get competitive with it if you says Savage Boss Maniac. It should be just the guy who rides the boar for 265 points. He does a ton of damage and is pretty mobile. Then you would have 1 Savage Big Stabbas, 1 Morboy Bone Totem Bearer, and then 2 Arrowboys and 3 Savage Orcs, again with Champas and Bone Shields. This is really just meant for your boar rider to just leverage his power projection as much as possible. Then the second way to build competitively around Bonesplitterz is going to be the Wargog Prophet. It's got a really great debuff ability that can reduce attacks for every opponent in a range around it. And so that's going to, decrease your opponent's ability to sort of push you off of objectives. So I think one of the better ways to build around that is to try to put as many units as possible into your warband. Now that can be tough with Bonesplitterz because you are working with some of the more expensive chaff units, but Savage Orcs are pretty tough to chew through for their points. They have, decent toughness and a lot of hit points, 15 hit points most of the time. So then, instead of the Savage Big Stabbas, which admittedly are one of your better damage output units in Bonesplitterz, we're instead going to be relying on 3 Morboy Bone Totem Bearers for our damage, and then just putting 5 Savage Orcs out there, just making it really difficult for your opponent to actually get you off of any objective, and hoping that you can use the Wah ability in round 1 from the Prophet to get out there. This one is sort of skewing into just one angle of attack. I do think that that's generally the best way to go about playing competitively with really low tier warbands, like sadly like Bonesplitterz, where yes, sort of point for point, your fighters just don't win their fights as often versus what your opponent's probably going to be bringing. So really lean into one specific strength. So now let's get into Ironjawz. The budget list for this I think is really cool. If you just get the two Warhammer Underworlds warbands, Morgoth's Crushes and Iron Skull's Boys, you can actually just make a Warcry warband just from them. And if you get the ones with no cards, they're only $25 each, so that's $50. And so you can get an Ardboy leader, a brute with a two-handed weapon, the big choppa. I know it's got a giant spiky mace thing, but I think that you can easily just run that as a big choppa. And then 2 brutes that dual wield, and then 2 Ardboys. You'll get 3 options. You can choose the dual wielding Ardboys or the one big axe Ardboy. Gives you some really good options and 6 units just for a low price. Then competitively, I think that you're best off building around the War Chanter. It's got a great mix of being able to hustle their movement in round 1 and then give a really big damage buff in rounds 2 and 3. So doing a War Chanta, a Brute with Big Choppa, 4 Ardboys with Big Choppas, and then 1 Ardboy with Choppa and Smasha, just because even though it doesn't get as big a bonus from the War Chanter, you'll have it in a different deployment group, and it's better at fighting different sets of toughnesses, so it gives you some um, sort of covering your bases there. Otherwise, you know, it's just 7 units, but they use the abilities really well. The Brute with the Big Choppa and the 4 Ardboys with Big Choppas, they all get a ton of benefit out of the War Chanta. You can get really far with Ironjawz with this warband. As far as a sweet list, I think Brutes are just amazing sculpts. I think they look really good. I would just play Oops All Brutes. You can do the Brute boss with the Claw, and then 3 dual-wielding Brutes and a Brute with Big Choppa. You can fit them all in one list, which is great. And then it's just 5 of them. It's just 1 box of Brutes. That's all you have to buy. You can have a Warcry warband out of it. It's only $5 more than the budget list that I showed. And you get to celebrate, one of the coolest sculpts in the game, in my opinion. Finally, we've got the Ogor Mawtribes, and they're actually one of the most competitive warbands in the game. So one way to do them on a budget is to just buy a box of Gluttons. The Glutton leader, the Crusher, deals quite a bit of damage for just 285 points, and then you just get 3 of the ones that dual wield with 2 clubs, 2 little clubs, and then the box comes with 2 Gnoblars, and all of that together is just under 1,000 points and a really complete warband with a bunch of big melee monsters that not every warband is going to be able to fight on even terms. If you are getting competitive, though, I would focus on Thunderfists, which are the Leadbelcher leader. Ever since the Grand Alliance books came out, you can take 2 leaders, and each Thunderfist can use the ability. Almost every warband has access to some version of this ability, but the one where if you get a kill, you get to get another movement or another attack. But Thunderfists have a pretty decent chance of one-shot killing a chaff unit, and so if you use the ability, you can often get 2-3 kills without even having to move off of 1 Thunderfist. So having 2 of them can just give you a ton of power. And then 1 Gorger. Gorgers are these move 5, sort of slightly smaller ogres that are just really good and really flexible. And then 7 Gnoblars. You're going to be noticing with a lot of the competitive lists, I really focus on getting as many bodies onto the board as possible. But Gnoblars also have the benefit of doing a little bit more damage for their points than they really should, or that other similar chaff units deal. They only move 4, which is too bad. But your Thunderfists are really the ones whose job is to project power across the board. Your Gnoblars are just flooding it. And that's how you're going to play sort of the most competitive version of Ogor Mawtribes, in my opinion. As far as sweet lists, though, there are so many options. The first one that I'm looking at here is the Icy version. This is if you wanted to do sort of the Icebrow Hunter and go as far as you can with that. You can just do 300 points for an Icebrow Hunter, and then you can fit 3 Frost Sabers in the list. You can actually fit 4 if you want, but I've put, also you have the option to put in an Icefall Yeti, or just 4 Gnoblars. So I really like the idea of 1 Icebrow Hunter, 3 Frost Sabers, and 4 Gnoblars as just a list that can do a lot because it's still got 8 models, but is getting a ton of movement off your Frost Sabers, and it's all sort of themed. You can paint it all icy if you want. And of course the Icebrow Hunter has the ability that combos with Frost Sabers. That's really nice. But you can go in a ton of different directions. You can check out my Beer Guts list in my Jenkentines video that was all just silly lists that I put out over that holiday, Valentine's Day, where it's just a brew git out of Gloomspite Gitz, just getting all of your ogres drunk, and it's just using all the ogres that get a ton of value off of the Brewgit ability. That one's really fun. You can also do a ton of cool stuff building around a tyrant, where he sort of can beat up other ogres to make them do a ton more damage, and so doing a tyrant plus a crusher can create some really cool stuff. So there you have it. 3 lists that you can go off of for each of the Destruction Warbands. Whichever one you like best, you know, here's the resource I'm putting out here. Really excited to be starting this series. I'll do 3 more, one for each Grand Alliance. And let me know in the comments if you like the spread of budget, competitive, and sweet, you know, quote unquote, or if you like a different type of list as well, included instead of one of those 3. I'm also going to be bringing in more sort of hard tactics videos after this series is done, but for now, this is what I'm going to be into for a little while. So until the next one comes out, may all your rolls be crits.